Welcome into a new episode of Hockey Hub here on NESN. Casey, Hudson, and Andy Brickley here to unpack NHL trade deadline information, explosions, aftershocks, all the emotions that you can revolve around that. We got to talk about some newbies on the block, and of course, the long-awaited animated game, Panthers coming to Boston, being hosted by the Boston Bruins. A lot to look out for, but Andy, Brickley, Brick, how was your weekend? There was a lot going on this weekend, that's for sure.
Well, yeah, the expectation coming around Friday, the trade deadline day, right up to 3 o'clock, was that the Bruins would make some transactions, whether it was the unrestricted free agents that they were either going to move on from or they couldn't find common ground in a contract negotiation, so you want to get some kind of return. Don't let them just walk out the door. And maybe a veteran player might be on the move, if the return was satisfactory and it made sense for the Boston Bruins moving forward. I don't think anybody anticipated the degree of the transactions that we saw over the weekend with this roster.
Yeah, I think staggering was probably one of the top things. Shock, overwhelming. It was the fans' reaction tells you a lot of it, but of course we got to talk about the largest piece being moved here, and we haven't gotten your take on it yet. Did you have any inclination that Brad Marchand was going to be one of the pieces to be moved on from when the NHL trade deadline struck at 3 o'clock on Friday?
Yeah, my expectation was that they would work out a contract between the player and management. I didn't think Brad Marchand was on the move. I understand that there was that possibility. When you go the whole year without a contract and you have tremendous value throughout the league, particularly teams that feel like they have a real legitimate chance to win a Stanley Cup, that he would be coveted. I understand that, but because of what we believe that Brad Marchand made very clear to the Boston Bruins was that he wanted to be a Boston Bruin. He didn't want to go anywhere. He wanted to stay a Bruin and finish his career as a Bruin and be one of the greatest Bruins of all time, which is where he was and where he was headed. So I think there was some surprise, particularly when you got around 2:45, 2:50, 2:55 on Friday, and nothing was happening, and then you heard. So I think everybody was shocked, surprised, and the question now is, obviously we weren't in the room. We're not part of the negotiation. We're not exactly sure how it went. I think the only thing you can do is take the word of a person that was in that room, and that's Donnie Sweeney. And Donnie Sweeney said it took a long time to get to an agreed-upon term, and we could never get to common ground when it came to the, whatever you want to call it, the salary. Or the salary cap number, the AAV, or however you want to describe it. And when they couldn't get to that area, that common ground, that they had to explore the possibility of trading him. And that is my understanding of how everything played out.
Yeah, that's definitely what we were hearing. And I like the fact that you mentioned 245, 250, 255. I mean, I think at 3 o'clock we all took an exhale and we forget that there's the queue. And there's probably a number of acquisitions still being panned out. And that's why the surprise probably hit a bit harder, because it was well after 3 o'clock. You hear that this is actually a realistic possibility. But then the next level of shock on top of this, Brick, was what came in return of trading the captain down to Florida, and now we're hearing potentially a conditional second-round pick, 2027. There's other things that could play into the fact that it could potentially turn into a first-round pick down the line, but that depends on how playoffs roll out. What did you make of this return after the initial shock that it was actually happening? Brad Marchand was going to Florida.
Yeah, here are my thoughts when it all went down. Number one, back in the day, the Bruins would never make a deal with the Canadians, right? You just don't deal with those guys. Hated rival. Well, I kind of put Florida in that category, given what they've done to the Bruins the last couple of years. So I was surprised that it was Florida. I was surprised that the Bruins would trade him not only in the East, but within the division itself. That surprised me. As far as the return, you look at a deal like Charlie Coyle and him going to Colorado, and the return they got, I thought, was more significant than the return that they got for Brad Marchand, and I thought Brad Marchand has more value. Charlie's going to a very good team. He's going to be slotted right where he belongs on a quality hockey team, third-line center, depth. He'll give you an advantage when you start talking about the bottom six, the construct of the roster, and that's perfect for him, and it's an opportunity for him to win. But he moved out west, and he went to a team that you see twice a year, home and home, if you're worried about those things. But the return was, I thought, more significant in terms of what it means to the Bruins roster. So, conditionally, if Brad goes to Florida, if he gets healthy, if he plays 2 series, if he plays 50% of the games or more, then it becomes a first-round pick, I think is how we understand how the deal is structured. And that's great. First-round picks are always good, but it's going to be a late pick. It'll be a late pick, right? It's Florida. So if it's Florida's pick, it's going to be somewhere in the bottom 5, 6, 7 of the first round, meaning somewhere between 25 and 32. And is that what he was worth? I thought he'd be worth more, maybe to other teams where you could get more of a return.
Oh, absolutely. And plus the impact. I mean, on this roster, he was sitting second in point production, and we know that the Bruins have been trying to collect some consistency since Four Nations. So that was probably another pivotal reason why none of us could really fathom Brad Marchand not being a part of this roster moving forward. But kind of unpacking further what you're saying in terms of the value coming back, you're not going to see those picks anytime soon. So there's no immediate or instant gratification in this situation. But we did see allegedly Pierre LeBrun kind of breaking down what the numbers could potentially look like. Now, from the front-loaded from 2016, while the AAV is $6.125 million, actual cash this season was $4 million, and $3 million of that was paid already in a signing bonus, which left $1 million in salary this year. With 50% retention by the Bruins, by Pierre's math, he thinks that the Panthers in reality will be paying Marchand a $125K for the rest of the season in real money. So just kind of putting all of that on top of it, and then the lack of instant gratification, I know that a number of fans and a number of us were just kind of like, what a big move here to not really be able to like tangibly feel how this roster, how this organization is going to move forward. So that brings me to another question. The captain moves on. It was very unexpected. There were some emotions, obviously, around the legacy of missing some pillars. So how does that implicate this locker room immediately? Because there was a game versus Tampa, who's putting out a lot of great hockey right now. So what did you make of those moves?
Well, working backwards, the game itself, Tampa did not play well, but the Bruins did. I'm not taking anything away from that performance. They got a second goal that was just unbelievable. Vasilevsky doesn't let goals like that in from the blue line when he's not back in his net in time. So, and that was a crucial goal in the game. So good for the Bruins. Good that they were a rally. Good that they were come together. It was good that they were welcoming to the new players that came into that locker room. But what it tells you with Brad moving on is that next leadership group that has to maintain that quality leadership, that culture in the room that's been a real thing for the last 2 decades. From Chara to Bergeron to Marchand, now they're all gone, and now that next group of players, meaning McAvoy, meaning Pastrnak, meaning Swayman, they're the guys that have to continue that culture and continue to strengthen that culture and make sure that that room does not get affected with these guys having moved on. When you think about Brad Marchand, just to backtrack a little bit, 36, 37 years old, a lot of hard minutes on that body, given his size and the way he competes and his will to win. So there was some concern there, I would imagine, as to how much you wanted to pay him moving forward, especially if you're going to give him three years or more. And the fact that he was coming off those 3 surgeries in the offseason, and it impacted him in a negative fashion, meaning, if he was healthier, you're looking at probably somewhere, he's only probably 10 points behind David Pastrnak right now. He'd have more production. He'd be more of an impact player. Hasn't been his best year. So when you combine those things and you look what the Bruins decided to do to move on from Brad and the way it has moved on, it concerns me that if you thought that maybe he would go chase a cup with Florida and then not sign a contract with Florida and be a free agent this summer and sign back with Boston, I don't think that's a possibility anymore. You entertain that idea, but I don't like the way it ended. And again, I don't have all the details, but that's just the feeling you get, that it wasn't the best of situations, and that now he's going to do something else and pivot and do something that he really wants to do once he and his family figure out exactly what that route is. So, yeah, I'm a little concerned, Case, just about the next leadership group, what it's going to look like, what it's going to feel like, and how impactful it's going to be.
Absolutely. Well, let's stick with that for a minute, because I'm glad you went there, because once the conversations kind of settled and everyone digested what was taking place, then a lot of the next part of the conversation was that there's a small door opening for a potential off-season return of Brad Marchand to Boston. But I like that you kind of went there. I know that you can't say too much on the matter because we're all still trying to figure it out. But between the way that things ended, between the fact that he did choose Florida, the connections of him in Florida and some of the guys that he'll get a chance to play with, we're not going to to see him right away because he's still weathering an injury. So there's hopes that he'll potentially be in the playoffs with the Panthers, that is. But why is it also so limiting to you to think that like he's not going to come back to Boston?
I'd love to talk to Brad and have him tell me that Donnie Sweeney was great and he did me a solid, and he sent me to a team that I was willing to go to, that gives me a chance to challenge for a Stanley Cup in the postseason, and that I can be a good player for a great team and try to experience another cup, cup number 2. So thank you, Don Sweeney. And we just couldn't find common ground, but the negotiation process was as it has to be. It's just business, and I have no ill will towards the Bruins or Donnie Sweeney or anybody associated with that organization, and that opens the door for him to come back. I hope that that's what happened. I'm just saying my own personal feeling, the way it was conveyed publicly so far, just gives me an uneasy feeling that I don't know if that's going to be a possibility.
Yeah, it's definitely a tough thing. I experienced it this summer in Tampa Bay when they moved on from Steven Stamkos, and it's very hard to kind of separate the business and the emotion of all of it because, when a player wants to stay, they vocalize that, but you also know when a team has to kind of start looking forward, and that's not to the next season. That's kind of the next 3-4 seasons when it comes to that. Legacy is another word that's been kicked around quite a bit ever since this transaction took place, and we're going to hear from Pasta and Swayman in a little bit, but in your personal perspective, what's the legacy that Brad Marchand leaves behind as he moves on to Florida?
I don't know how to put it into terms, but to see where he came from, 2010, somewhere around there, 2009, 2010, the player that he was and the player that he became in his time here in Boston is absolutely a phenomenal story. To be a real pest to play against, to be a fourth line, a bottom six guy, a penalty killer, somebody that played on the edge, try to get you off your game, crossed the line a number of times and suspended and fined, and that's what he was. That's how he made the team. And then to be one of the best players in the National Hockey League, and to be a winner, to be a champion, to be highly successful in terms of goals, assists, points, to want to be the best version of himself, to learn from those that he was playing with, the Bergerons and the Charas, to want to be like that, to be a leader, to have a presence in the room, have his word carry with the rest of the guys, and to carry the torch for what it means to be a Boston Bruin. I think that's his legacy. It's a little long in terms of trying to put it into words for a legacy, but from where he came from to what he is today is absolutely a phenomenal story.
It speaks volumes if you can't simplify his legacy. I mean, and it's not meant to be simplified because everything you just said just shows the impact that he had on the locker room, on the organization, on Boston. I mean, I know for me, I know I come from a Florida market, but of course there's guys who I just highly respect because of the pain that they were to my team growing up, that is. And what I've always loved about Brad's play is he played bigger than himself. Mm-hmm. And I think I love that, especially as like a tiny framed person myself, just to see how bullish he could be and how impactful he can be and how much space he could take up. It wasn't expected, so he has such a unique journey for a reason. So I'm glad you weren't able to simplify that.
And the X's and O's part of it, like he's always a good penalty killer because he had a good stick and he had good speed and he understood angles defensively. So that allowed him to be a good penalty killer right off the bat. But then he learned to become a better power play guy. You stuck him on the power play early. He didn't understand it. He didn't understand triangles or 2-on-1s, if that's how you want to describe it. That's how I describe it. But he made himself a better power play guy. He made himself a better 5-on-5 guy. He added all kinds of different ways to score goals into his arsenal. He scored shorthanded goals. He scored power play goals, game-winning goals. He was a physical guy. He wasn't afraid to push the needle as far as the emotion. And he just bled black and gold. He loved the Bruins. He loved that sweater. He loved the crest. He loved his teammates. He loved the history. He took time to know the history of the organization. And I can't say that's the case with a lot of the younger players, and maybe because they move around a little bit more than back in the day. But he understood the history and the players that came before him. He understood the 100 years of Boston Bruins history, the year of the centennial, and the players that came back, and the reverence that he had for those that came before him. All that stuff matters when you take a look at Brad Marchand, the person and the player.
Definitely embodied the culture. And as I mentioned, legacy was a specific word used for a reason. Let's hear from Pasta and Swayman and what they made of the trade of Brad Marchand.
Yeah, it's been very tough, emotional, sad. Like I said, 12 to 24 hours. Obviously, a lot of stuff happened. This group, I lost personally 3 really close friends, and it's very, very tough pill to swallow. And obviously, not only we lost big leaders in this team, but great human beings, guys with the families that I was really close to, and been here since day one with them. So it was a really tough day yesterday.
In that sense, Pasta, how hard to wake up this morning and just sort of give your head a shake and come to work?
I'm not gonna lie. When I woke up today, I honestly thought it was a dream, and today, yesterday was so much going on that this morning the reality really hits, and that I would say was a little harder this morning. But you are still a professional hockey player. You do have a job to do, and you have to get the mindset and get the mindset ready and make sure you look forward. It's obviously we got some great addition, and we have a lot of hockey left, so we have to focus on this group right now and make sure we keep getting better. Like I think the last two games were amazing. That's the way we need to play for the rest of the year. We're gonna win more games than we're gonna lose if we play like this and compete every night like we did in Carolina and tonight.
I haven't really felt like that in my life, just going through it. And I've talked to guys that have kind of been through it, and they said the same thing. It's just complete unexpected stuff. I know none of those guys wanted to leave, and they wanted to see it through here, and we had the ability to see it through with those guys, and that's just the most devastating part, I think. And it was a roller coaster of emotions, and the human side of me was crushed.
In that spirit, Jeremy, how hard to wake up at whatever time today, 9 o'clock, sort of just, take a blink and then come to work?
Yeah, it's just, that's what we signed up for, and we're here for a reason. The guys that are in this locker room here have a job to do, and especially the guys like myself and Pasta and Pav that have been here for a few years now that know what it takes to be a Bruin and to make sure the culture stays what it has been, and that's our job, and that's something that I'm taking on full swing, and I'm excited to. And it's just unfortunate how it worked out a little quicker than I expected, but I know that I'm up for the task. I know that Pasta's up for the task, McAvoy, and that's something that we're all going to build on. And the new faces in this locker room are going to help us do that. And I know that we got full buy-in, and it showed tonight, and that's something that we could seriously build off of.
When you say quicker in terms of kind of full immersion into this is business, is that your?
It happened less than 12 hours ago. So those guys are. I can only imagine the whirlwind of events that those guys are going through, but it feels like, again, it's a completely different room in here right now, and that's okay. But again, we're not going to just let it go that we don't miss those guys. We miss those guys a lot, and we wish them nothing but the best. And we know that they're going to help their teams have success. So it's our job to stick to the process, represent the Boston Bruins the right way, and lead by example.
All right, so that was Pasta and Swayman from Saturday. Obviously, news still very fresh, and just to hear Swayman say that the human side of him is crushed right now, I can only imagine how those guys have to process, but it's a big page to turn and to do it with immediates behind it. So, Brick, what's a locker room like? What after something like this, and to have to play the next day, and like the difficulty of putting your emotions in check, and we kind of touched on it already, like pull off a win, make a statement for your team. And Swayman after the game even said kind of build off of those guys' legacy that the team had to move on from.
Yeah, I liked a lot of what both the players had to say, and I think it gives you a good glimpse into what professional sports is like on the emotional side. You have to compartmentalize, you have to take those emotions, you have to park it because you got to go out and do a job, and both those players referenced that. I also like the fact that Swayman said, look, this is what we signed up for. This is the business part of playing professional hockey. And even though we don't like it and emotionally it hurts and we're cut to the core because we've we've gone to battle, so to speak, with these brothers, because you truly are like a family when you spend this amount of time together and rely on one another to get a job done, and you all have the same goal in mind, and you got to have that closeness if you're going to be successful. So it hurts when players go out the door, but as part of the leadership group, and that's something Swayman also touched on that we've already talked about, McAvoy, Pastrnak, and Swayman. Swayman throws a shutout. And the Bruins win. They beat a good Tampa team, and they came together in quick fashion and played good hockey. And he's right. They have to sustain that because it's still all about winning. The guys that are in the locker room, they understand what's going on. They understand what the Bruins are doing. The draft capital and the deals that they made, and the established guys that went to other teams, and it's going to affect the quality of your roster. But you can still win games when you come together, and that's what they're going to have to do. And that it's required by leadership of players and leadership of the coaching staff. Joe Sacco's got to do a good job of keeping these guys where they need to be focused and make sure that their habits and their details are very good. And you hope that the new guys coming in, they look at it as an opportunity. I know when I got traded, it wasn't a trade deadline. It was early in the year, but I've experienced that emotion of I'm not wanted to pivoting and say, no, I'm wanted by some other team and I'm valued by another team. So the players have to deal with that themselves as individuals, but as players that are still in that Bruins locker room that are considered the leaders, it's their job. It's on their shoulders to make sure this is a smooth transition.
Absolutely. And you touched on leadership, and one of the hardest conversations that take place, especially now that it seems like the NHL is moving on quickly from guys, and moving captains around is becoming a little less staggering, a little less shocking. We've seen so much of it in this season alone. I mean, from July 1 to now. So, of course, that brings the next question. They already said that they're not going to name a C moving forward for the rest of the season. But is there a guy that just kind of stands out to you a little bit more that can potentially put this weight on his shoulders?
Well, at the beginning of the year when we had our meetings here at Nesson and we talked about storylines for the upcoming season, one of my biggest storylines that I wanted to share, that I wanted to explore, and that I was hopeful was going to happen was that Charlie McAvoy would emerge as a star in this league, that he would be a dominant force on the blue line. He would challenge for the Norris Trophy. He'd play 25 minutes a night, and when he knew when to take over a game, he would take over a game. And that leadership and that confidence and that growth in a star player in the making was going to happen this year. It hasn't happened for a number of reasons. The team has played poorly. He's dealt with some injuries, and here we are at the trade deadline with a lot of veteran good players that are leaving. So that is my expectation, Casey. I would expect that Charlie McAvoy is the guy that they're probably targeting, that they want to wear the C. I'm not sure that's where they'll go. Is he ready for it? Is he matured enough both as a player and as a person to understand what's required of that job? I know Brad Marchand talked about it when he became the captain, and everybody expected him to be the captain. But, as much as you're prepared for it, the challenges that present themselves on a daily basis, it can affect you if you're not strong enough and if you're not ready for it. But I expect, from where I'm sitting, that's the direction the Bruins are headed.
I like it. I think a number of fans can get behind that storyline. But for Bruins storylines, NHL storylines, and more hockey, make sure that you continue to stay tuned with us at Hockey Hub. You're watching Hockey Hub now. If you like what you're hearing, if you want to get more insight in the players, Bruins locker room, as well as the NHL as a whole, make sure to like and subscribe the show. Hockey Hub can be found on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, or wherever else you get and enjoy your podcast. All right, we're pivoting perfectly into some other pillars that were moved on from when all this trade transactioning took place. And I can't wait to get your insight on this, actually, Brick, because you and I got to chat the last time we did Hockey Hub together. And one of the guys that were moved on from, Brandon Carlo, there was a number of fans, there was a number of spectators and analysts that said he still had more to give this specific roster, to give this Bruins team. So what did you make of them moving on from Charlie Coyle as well as Brandon Carlo?
Yeah, my immediate reaction and my immediate emotion is disappointed because they're all quality people. We have the good fortune to be around these guys on a daily basis, travel with them, stay in the same hotels, on the plane, and you get to know the guys, and you keep your distance, but you get to know them as people, and they're high-quality people. And Brandon Carlo, just a nice person, good guy to talk to, very thoughtful. His life isn't entirely hockey. There's a lot going on in the world that's worth discussing, and he was one of those guys that you can gauge a conversation. And he was involved. I think he was one of the player reps for the union. So, he had his morals, he had his ethics, and he had his value system, and I appreciated all that. Now, as far as the player, I don't like to move on from guys that you drafted and developed. that I think are good players. 6'5", great skater, can defend, good stick, good penalty killer, a guy that you'd want to get matchups with some of the top offensive guys on the opposing team. He didn't have a good year. And again, you're guilty by association, because the team did not meet expectations, have not met expectations yet this year. You're affected by that. Your play slips a little bit. The question I think the Bruins had, or I'm surmising, is, has he peaked as a player? It was a step backward this year. He still defended pretty well, but he wasn't making that first good pass out of the defensive zone. His gaps weren't as tight, and he got victimized sometimes by getting beat to the outside when you try to overplay the middle. Whatever it is, his game wasn't up to his own personal standard, and I just hope that they don't think that that he had peaked as a player, because I don't think he has.
Right.
And I think once he gets entrenched and established there in Toronto, that's a nice pickup for the Leafs.
Yeah, and I think that Toronto kind of stayed within the identity they're trying to build over there by being able to attain a guy like Carlo. You already talked about Charlie Coyle and, the presence that he'll have in Colorado. So I think that perfectly places us to some of the newbies on the block. Casey Mittelstadt comes over from Colorado, joins this Bruins roster. I've been a fan of his career in a number of ways, and I know that he had some inconsistency in his play. He kind of had to jump into a bit of a fractured roster in Colorado. They had so many injuries, players coming in and out. His role didn't particularly change, but his ability to step up maybe did. But we've seen him be able to step up in tough moments for Colorado. You kind of got a glimpse of him versus Tampa Bay. What did you see? He picks up a point. He's a guy who can kind of help create those passing lanes. I love his aggression with getting to the net. I think he's very creative in that sense to help these guys get some action going on in the middle of the ice and start getting plays going in the neutral zone. So what did you make of the addition of Mittelstadt thus far?
Well, when I think of the player, I picture him in Buffalo, and he came in with a lot of expectations. He was going to be a great player coming out of college, and he had a sick skill set. He could pass. He had great vision, good offensive mind. A lot was put on his shoulders, and Buffalo's been a mess for over a decade, and he didn't thrive there. And I think it's a lack of leadership that's hurt Buffalo all these years, because it's a great hockey market. I think everybody wants them to be good, and everybody's lost for an explanation. They've been through coaches and GMs. It's just not a good situation. They can't make the postseason. So I think he was affected by that as a young player. There wasn't any guidance for him, and I think that hurt him. And I think he was miscast a little bit in Colorado. They moved on from Kadri after they had won the Cup, and I think they wanted Mittelstadt to be that 2C behind McKinnon. I don't think that really was his calling with that group. So the hope is that at the age that he's at, what is he, 26 years old, so he's entering the prime of his career. He really is. Ages 26 or 27 to, say, 31, 32 is really the prime. You've matured physically. You understand what your skill sets are, what your limitations are, how you best fit, how you need to play to be highly successful, and you really start to figure those things out at that point in your career, and I'm hopeful that's where he's headed. I liked what I saw in the one game that he's played. He moved the puck, just even a simple play that doesn't show up on the score sheet where, he's under duress in the defensive zone, and he makes a good little 10-foot pass in traffic to get you out of your own zone. That doesn't lead to anything on a stat sheet, but it's noticeable if you're watching the game, because that's the way the Bruins need to play, especially if you're going to be in the middle. But he's a guy that can play the wing, he can play center ice. You get a good, if you find a good fit for him, somebody that he's going to have instant chemistry with. It could be just one guy, or it could be a line. I think he's going to help your power play because of the things I said earlier about his vision, his ability to move the puck. I think he'll gain confidence, and I think that the hope is that he will find a nice home in the prime of his career in Boston, and it shows in the way he plays in all three zones, but more importantly, offense. The Bruins are looking for more skill, more speed, more offense, a better power play, all the things that have haunted them this year has put them in the position that they're in. I think this kid can help you in a number of those areas.
Yeah, I feel like a few fans were like, we're not really hearing the theme strong two-way player from this guy, but the capability is there, but he's going to add to the offensive structure, and you make a great point to note something that you probably don't see initially unless you're focused on the game from an analytical perspective, those passes to help them get out of the zone. That's kind of an expectation for Charlie Coyle. Help the Bruins get out of their zone, help the Bruins not be so pinned, and that's typically an asset, a skill set to his game, but Mittelstadt has the same capability. And we kind of saw a quick connection between him and Koepke, or was that just the fact that Koepke's growing so much in his game?
Yeah, Cole Koepke's a great story, and I know they're all Minnesota guys, right? So they knew each other, and Lettieri on the right side. That line was really good against Tampa, and you'd like to give Mittelstadt credit for it. But yeah, Koepke's got good wheels. Had the setback when he had the head injury, when he took that big hit, getting the puck out of the zone, a month or two ago. That can derail you a little bit, but he's played his way up to the third line. He's a good skater. He's a good student of the game. He takes coaching. He wants to be here. He wants to be impactful. And maybe you get some instant chemistry, like we said. You never know. And when he brings his skating game, Koepke, net drive, get in on the forecheck, pressure on the back check because you use your skating ability. He can be a highly effective guy. He wants to be here. He understands the situation the Bruins are in. So why not play my best hockey of the year right now in order to be part of the equation moving forward?
Absolutely. I think Koepke got the memo, and we'll see more out of him game by game. But another memo you guys should all have for NESN is NESN 360. Stream the entire Sox season with NESN 360 annual plan, available at an all-new reduced price of just $20 a month paid annually. And for a limited time, get 4 tickets to Fenway with your purchase. Visit NESN360.com to sign up today. Well, the conversation doesn't stop with me and Brick. We now have the honor to add Sophia. I wanted to say into the chat. That's a whole different show, but you guys want to watch Boston has entered the chat as well. But Sophia, we're catching up on the new players. We talked about Brad Marchand, the legacy, the potential new step up of who the C could be coming up. But how are you on this day? I mean, how was your weekend after everything?
It was good. It was a crazy Friday. I'm just slowly transitioning back into the office and back kind of around the NESN folks, and I've yet to attend a Bruins morning skater practice even. So I'll be doing that tomorrow and excited to be around the team. I think we talked about it off camera, Casey, but definitely, on a personal level, like I was watching you guys chat about it and Brooke chat about, the relationships with the guys that have all been gone. I was very much looking forward to seeing those guys. So I did not have the chance to do that and, didn't get to say my goodbyes, but it's going to be really exciting to go into a locker room that you heard Pasta say, or maybe it was Sway. It's a completely different room right now that's full of opportunity and full of, something we haven't seen yet as hosts or analysts or reporters. So I'm going to be reporting to start when I'm back with the team, and I just feel like there are a bunch of new stories that I could dig into and get and learn. So I'm excited about that.
So if Toronto can somehow maybe win the division and the Bruins get wild card, you could see Brandon.
Okay.
You could visit with Brandon Carlo Tuesday night. Florida's coming to town, and my understanding is Brad Marchand will be with the team, so you'll have an opportunity.
Right.
You'll have an opportunity to say hello, goodbye, however you want to phrase it.
You're right.
And then you'll have to wait. You'll have to wait for the Stanley Cup final to have a chance to see Charlie. So.
But Charlie will probably come back here in the summer anyway.
Yeah,
so there's that. So you're right.
Yeah.
I will have my time, and with Trent, I'll figure it out somehow. But yeah, it'll be odd for Brad to come back. I mean, I was reading a bit of his quotes in the media with the Florida media about coming back, and obviously he said the same thing. It's going to be odd to be on the other side, but I'm sure that return that quickly will be just nice to get that over with.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, if it's better that it's this early. But I did want to kind of gauge your emotion on this, especially because you've been around the guys. Like, is it better that they play the Panthers right away after all of this taking place? I mean, I know Tampa was first, but now you've got Marchand. And then on top of it, he had a pretty light press conference asking if he had a tan and stuff already. So it's the animated game on NESN. We'll get to see Adam Pellerin in a different light, that's for sure. But what do you make of the emotions that'll probably surround this as the Panthers come to Boston?
Yeah, I mean, it's been emotional between these two teams anyway. Every time they face each other, obviously Brad not playing, so that's going to, if he was on the ice lacing it up, then that would be very, very different. But I mean, that's something the Bruins need. They've needed to make sure they find and dig deep to find that emotion to keep playing as if they are chasing a wild card position, because they're not mathematically eliminated. So I think it's good for the team. I think it's good for the game. I'm excited about the animated game. Didn't grow up with things like that. I think if I was a kid, I think it would be super fun to watch. I think the NHL is doing a really good job kind of reaching different audiences and different markets. So it's going to be just I think great energy all around.
I think one of the best examples of how the players have to move on is, the trade Ottawa and Buffalo made. And the reaction from Brady Tkachuk, the captain of the Senators, and losing one of his best friends in that deal, Josh Norris, moving on, and he was emotionally, visibly upset when he got the news. Yet he had to go out and play a game, and all he does is play a great game and score in overtime to win it. That's leadership, and that's how you react to the business side of the game. And I think the Bruins could take note of that. I liked the way they played in Tampa, and I liked what the players said. We're going to build off this and keep pushing for a playoff spot.
Yeah, and actually, Brick, you've obviously been through your fair share of seeing teammates come and go in just different rooms and different environments. What was your process in separating the emotion, or did you use the emotion in the game?
Yeah, and I had mentioned to Casey just in passing, I got traded early in my career. I played 1 year with the Flyers, spent most of the year in the American League, and had a great year. And I was one of those guys that they were drafting and developing, and I was going to be on the big club, my second year in the league. And I went to training camp, and all of a sudden it seemed like I was on the outs. They were thinking of moving me, and then all of a sudden I was in a deal that sent me to Pittsburgh, and it put me in the NHL because Pittsburgh wasn't a very good hockey team, so my opportunity was greater. The Flyers were an established, with star players. So, but I remember saying, to myself, and the feeling I had was I wasn't wanted. I was hurt by it. I was physically hurt by it. And the emotional side was I couldn't believe it. I'm going to a bad team. I'm probably not going to play in the playoffs. A team that was on the brink of bankruptcy in Pittsburgh. This is pre-Mario. This is like 1983. And it was a difficult process to go through, and it took you a little bit before, because we had poor leadership in Pittsburgh because it was a bad situation. And you need that leadership, you need that guidance to help you make that transition to say, this is a good thing, this is a good opportunity, this is a good chance for you to grow. You're going to play significant minutes. You're going to play in every situation. And if you continue to that development arc that you want to be on, and your desire to be an NHL player and an impactful NHL player, but it's a process that you go through, and it's not an easy one. It's not an easy one. It doesn't happen overnight. And these guys are thrust right into games, and they're given different roles with different teams with high expectation. And then the players that come to Boston, they have to understand that this is opportunity. That's the way they have to look at it. It has to be opportunity, and that has to be your mindset.
It's funny because you guys both touched on two different emotional highlights that are going to play out over the next couple of weeks, that's for sure. And even without Marchand lacing up, there's always the intensity between the Bruins and the Panthers. We talked earlier, Brick, about the natural rivalry that is. So there's so much extra emotion coming in to that matchup. But sticking kind of with the player mentality here, a name that was actually kicked around the trade block a lot more than any other name was Morgan Geekie. And you have talked about players that have to take that next step and kind of get their game going a bit more. Brick, what are your expectations out of a player like Morgan Geekie, who had the emotional capacity of thinking he was potentially on the trading block? Now he has to step up in a little bit more of a leadership role.
Yeah, I love the way he developed last year. You could see him gaining knowledge and understanding the game and understanding how his skill set best translates to the Boston Bruins. And he might have been kind of a bottom six guy when he was first acquired, depth guy, maybe some versatility, play him in the middle, play him on the wing. And then as he continued to grow and understand himself in the game and what he brought to the table, and then when given the opportunity, be ready for that opportunity, be prepared for it, and execute. And he's been able to do that, especially playing with David Pastrnak. So, and Pavel Zacha, that's been a really good line. But I really like his growth, and I believe the Bruins, when they come to the trade deadline, or even think into the offseason, what are we going to do to retool? Because that's the path they had to take. They identified Morgan Geekie as a guy worth keeping. They like his skill set. They like his growth. They like his maturity. They like his desire to be a better player than he was when he arrived. And he's still a young kid, another kid that's just entering the prime of his career. So great opportunity for a guy that's made the most of that opportunity. He continues to score goals. He continues to get better. He continues to grow in terms of being a complete player. He's a little stronger than you think. He's a little faster than you think. Some people underestimate those skills in his game, and it allows him an advantage and allows him to be successful.
Yeah. These new pieces.
And Brick, go ahead, Casey.
No, go ahead, Sophia.
No, I was just going to say, with Charlie Coyle gone, so many. One of the words we used all the time was utility guy, and he can play in different positions. Is Morgan Geekie similar in the sense of, I know he's found a solid spot at the moment, but dating back to last year, as you said, he was moved around a lot and seemed to, be able to at least take on those different roles.
Yeah, no, I think his versatility is an asset, and usually versatility is an asset until, it hurts you as an individual. They say, well, we can play him in this position because he can handle the responsibility, when he's better off playing somewhere else because he can score a lot of goals and put up a lot of points. You follow what I'm saying? So sometimes that versatility puts you in a checking centerman role when you'd like to be a goal-scoring wing, So, but
yes.
he has that versatility, and I just love the way he's taken this opportunity and really, really run with it.
Yeah, you can always see the gears going for him heading into a game, coming out of a game, and like the way that he's just learning and applying. But Sophia, I love that you mentioned you're ready to come in with the reporter aspect, and I know we have to prepare and have these first kind of couple questions frame of mind, but what are some first things that you want to dive into and know about these guys as we kind of have this retooling and moving forward?
I mean, that's a great question. Like, I have I've been around Bruins for a very long time, and my little, the break here, it wasn't like, 5-year break, but I definitely approach things in a way where I observe for a while before I jump in and ask or try to, do too much. I just like to kind of observe and be around, the team, which helps, being on the road and traveling and just being in the energy and the vibe. Obviously, I can approach the guys I know and the guys I don't know. There's no intimidation there, but sometimes less is more, and so I'll probably observe for the first few days and few games and then get to know where I feel like I want to take, the direction. And I'm someone who, having not played the game at a high level, more, just backyard style shinny in Toronto, growing up with, neighborhood friends and my brothers, I feel like my first questions always veer towards like personality or family or feelings. And then once I kind of get to watch and see a little bit, I don't see the game like Brick does. Let me tell you that. Like, Brick just is unbelievable. Like, what your reads and everything. So I like to kind of start there to get to know the players and then to see how they, the coaches will move people around and see how the lineup looks, kind of go from there. So I'm excited.
I like when you approach the subject subtly, but the players understand what you're asking. When you ask them now, at the point in the season you're coming back now, and given what's happened over the weekend, and the new players and the retooling and what's happening with the Bruins, but the believability quotient,
Yes.
when you ask these players, like, you understand the business, you understand what's happened, but where's that believability that this team can not be in a 5-year rebuild and it's going to happen right away, and we got great assets. We don't have to wait for 2008, 28, 29 for these transactions to pay off. It's going to pay off right away. We're going to be a good team. We're going to get healthy. We're going to get our 2 top defensemen back. Sway's going to find his A game for the rest of the season and beyond. That kind of believability. When you engage the players in that kind of conversation, you get my attention. I know that because I want to hear from them.
Yeah, no, and that's so true. And like, I think, fan reactions were all over the place on Friday, and obviously with Marchand and the C, people were freaking out. But when you really let the dust settle, Don Sweeney got a lot of assets in return, and he did a really good job in the sense of, like you said, we'll see what happens in the summer. That's something we talked about, Casey, on Friday. Like, the summer's going to say a lot too, and what kind of coach they're going to hire and everything. But it doesn't feel like this is going to take 5 years. There are moves made, and there's momentum now in a different way. And like you said, Brick, that's something that any player in that room can buy into.
Well,
and one last thought on that. I haven't done a deep dive into exactly all the draft capital that they got or how much cap space they're going to have this summer. But what I've learned over the last year plus is they don't have enough young talent in Providence that's pushing. That's pushing the veteran players, and if you don't have that institutional depth, how are you going to get that retool so it doesn't take 5 years where these draft picks need time to develop? It's either the trade market or the free agency market. And I'll be very curious to see which direction the Bruins want to go in the offseason, because a lot of times you don't want to make trades at the deadline under duress just because it's a deadline and you want to make a trade. And I didn't get that sense from the Bruins this year. I think they made deals that they fully analyzed and say this is going to benefit our team in the short term, long term. And I'll be curious to see how aggressive they'll be in the trade market and or the free agent market this summer.
Yeah, it's going to pique a lot of questions. I love that reporting style, though. Sophia, you have the ability to illuminate personalities because I think you learn where chemistry can start to grow and build because this is a game about chemistry. It's not always about the biggest names on the roster. But another big question that's coming into play with all of the movement, and Brick, I'd love your opinion on this one, is what's a realistic kind of acclimation period for these new players? Because sometimes, depending on where you lie, and, there's still a little bit of framework outside of the wild card spot for the Boston Bruins, but, there's this instant gratification we talked about at the top of Hockey Hub, and you've got these new guys, they've got potential, but what's a realistic acclimation period?
From now to the end of the year. Mm-hmm. I think it would take that kind of period of time for these players to feel, to get acclimated, to feel comfortable. And I think if you break it down by position, the guys that are going to be asked to play center, that's probably the hardest transition to make because of the way the Bruins play. A lot of teams play man-on-man in the defensive zone, not to get into X's and O's. But the Bruins, the way they defend, and it hasn't been great this year, they rely a lot on their sentiment and the reads that the sentiment have to make in conjunction with the D and how they try to own the middle of the ice and angle you to the places that you don't want to go as an offensive player. So I think that'll be the hardest in transition. So if Mittelstadt's going to play center or the Russian centerman, the little guy, how do you say his name? Khusnutdinov, right? Mm-hmm. Something like that. Who's a very good skater, by the way. That stood out, I thought, in the game against Tampa, and you knew that just from when you read the bios of these players. But I would expect it would take them the full how many we got left? 17 games, whatever it is. I think it's going to take the 17 games and maybe then some for the players to feel like, this is where I'm slotted, and this is where I best benefit the Boston Bruins.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Khusnutdinov. It took me a while to practice his name as well. They brought him in to help with some hits, to help with blocking shots. We did see a number of those plays be made versus Tampa Bay. And then hopefully, again, you mentioned us doing our research on the players and stuff like that. He's supposed to be able to help slot in on gaps and kind of take away those opportunities of pucks getting behind the forwards in quick moments, which should help out Swayman. So I look forward to seeing how much he continues to grow in the system. But Sophia, Brick, the bigger question in the midst of all of this is what is the realistic expectation or possibility of a wild card spot? 66 points right now. The dance keeps going on. If the Bruins if the Rangers have a skid, if there's just possibility, but it still feels so far out of reach. Sophia, what are your thoughts?
The Bruins can't, if they know it's good for them, you just can't be paying attention to that, and you have to just see it, that the opportunity is there, that you're there, and it can't be about other teams. Obviously, I understand that they've put themselves in a very difficult position, losing so many of their previous games after the break and after before the break even, and then after the tournament, blowing leads and stuff like that. But that's something that you just can't look at, and you're taking it game by game, which is so cliche. I get mad sometimes when players give me cliche answers, and here I am giving you one. But it really is like a game. Because it's true. There's truth to that. It is a game by game thing. But maybe Brick has a different opinion. What do you think, Brick?
Yeah, I think it's going to be extremely difficult to get into the postseason this year because of the facts that you pointed out. They left so many points on the table. They let points get away, games where they had leads after 2 periods, giving up late goals in periods. All the signs of a team that should not be in the playoffs were there too often this year for the Boston Bruins, and that's why they're in the position that they're in. Can they still make it? Yes. You want to be optimistic. You want to believe in these guys, but until you see the new players that they've gotten, until you see the reaction by the guys that are here, until you see the leadership take over from the new guys that now have control of the room or a voice in the room, or that have to pave the way and get that leadership from your coaching staff, that they maintain that level of believability. But it's going to be extremely difficult. They've been getting help. None of the teams really, I don't know, maybe you make an argument for Columbus, but all the other teams that are in that bunch where the Bruins are right now, nobody's pulling away. Nobody's grabbing wild card 1 or wild card 2 saying, this is mine, this is mine, this is ours. So that gives you that belief that if they just keep amassing some points and playing some quality hockey, that there's always a chance. You never know. And we've seen teams that finish, wild card 2 do some damage in the postseason.
That's true. Well, before we get ready to wrap up here, one more hot seat moment for all three of us. The expectation, can emotions help the Bruins pull off 2 points versus the Panthers? What do you think, Brick?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm encouraged by what I saw in Tampa. When you face we'll call this adversity because you lost some good friends, and it affects, it affects not only your emotions, but it affects the room and the process that you have to go through. We've talked at length about that already here this podcast. But based on what I saw, based on what I know from the players that are here, that have been here, that are leadership guys, that are quality NHL players, something to prove, something to accomplish, a sense of we can do this together. I think that's there. It can be there. And if you have to just go game by game, then they should be all in. It should be a playoff game, and they should want to and relish beating the Florida Panthers. They should have their A game. They should feel good about it. They're home from Tampa. They got a couple of days off to get rested and recharged and deal with the emotions and move on. And I think they'll be ready to play.
That's so.
I agree. Same hot take. I'm seeing 2 points on the board and hope that emotion drives them and the momentum carries from Saturday for sure.
Absolutely. Okay. I think the same thing. I think that the emotionally charged performance in some of the interviews that we have seen, it should make for a great play. And I mean, at least one thing has been more on the consistent side for the Bruins. It's kind of their way of bringing their game, their A game that is, to home ice. So having that home ice, bringing the Panthers into their territory, hopefully they can shake things up. As for Sophia, Brick, and myself, we're getting ready to call this Hockey Hub a wrap, but you guys know the deal. Make sure you like and subscribe to Hockey Hub. Make sure you have NESN 360, and all the goods downloaded so you can keep up to date on all hockey news, not just Bruins, but NHL as a whole, especially as we start gaining gear towards the potential playoff picture. On top of liking and subscribing to Hockey Hub, make sure you follow NESN across all social accounts. That's at NESN. Guys, it's been great chatting with you all, and let's see what takes place between the Panthers and the Bruins. It's the animated game, one of the best ways to watch hockey and learn. Adam Pellerin takes a great lead on that one, so make sure you do not miss the Panthers versus the Bruins.